What's going on, everybody? This is Kinky, and today we're going to be talking a little bit about classic WoW again. Today we're going to be talking about gold and how you can make it and the best strategies for doing so. Gold was not easy to come by. You had to work hard to get your gold. At level 60, it would often take 2 hours to make just 100 gold, and that was if you knew what you were doing. The level 40 mount cost 100 gold, and the level 60 mount cost 1,000 gold. And on top of that, if you were a raider and weren't lucky enough to be in a guild that supplied you with consumables, you would typically go through 200 to 300 gold in a 3-hour raid. Gold is also extremely important for leveling. You want to make sure that you have your level 40 mount as soon as humanly possible so you can increase your productivity. Also makes farming much faster. So how can you make gold? There are two primary ways to do that, either farming or crafting. If you're farming, you're going to be looking for materials off of mobs and possibly some bind on equip items off of mobs as well. If you're crafting, you're going to be looking at professions. For farming, there are a couple different types of materials that you can actually go for. To start with, you can look for fishing materials. Fishing materials were primarily used by cooks and were often overlooked. Prices are much lower than in other gathering professions because it's easy to level. Skinning was another good way to collect raw materials. Skinning was used primarily by leather workers. Small amounts were used in other professions. Skinning, again, like fishing, is easy to level. If you focus on your own mobs, sometimes you can even find other people who are killing mobs next to you that you can also skin. Unlike mining, there is no real competition in the open world because you just skin what you kill. Skinning also had trainers in all of the major cities, so you could get to your next skill gap easily, something the crafting professions lacked. Mining was another gathering profession that you could pick up if you wanted to gather raw materials. It was primarily used for blacksmithing and engineering, and again, you could use small amounts of it for other professions. Unlike skinning, there was a challenge to leveling mining, because you needed to seek out the nodes, and oftentimes they were in areas that you didn't want to go and level up in. On top of this, there are gaps in leveling up mining where it'll be much harder to come across the nodes that you need to collect in order to increase your mining skill. That being said, just like skinning, there are trainers in all of the major cities. Herbalism is the last of our gathering professions that you could pick up to use to make money at endgame or even while you're leveling up. Herbalism was primarily used in alchemy, and small amounts again were used in other professions. While herbalism was challenging to level up, it wasn't nearly as difficult as mining to level up. Just like mining, sometimes you had to go to places that you didn't want to level to be able to seek out nodes that you could use to level up your herbalism. And just like with mining, there is a big competition for it in the open world, especially at endgame. Because of how many people used consumables in raids in classic vanilla, all of the endgame herbs were highly sought after, and there were usually many people farming them at all times of the day. Well, most people don't pick two gathering professions because they want to be able to craft their armor as they level, or people will take herbalism to create potions as they level. The reason why herbs are so competitive is because all class benefits from it, whereas if you're playing a druid, you would not benefit from being a blacksmith aside from weapon crafting, but a warrior who benefits from blacksmithing also benefits greatly from being an herbalist and alchemist. So what are some of the strongest classes for gathering raw materials? Your mage is going to be very strong just because the mage is very versatile and very mobile. Your druid can also be very good for this because your druid is easy to level, self-sustain, had heal and tank modes, and was very mobile, especially at earlier levels where you could actually use this to your advantage to collect more herbs faster to get your mount. The hunter is another good option just because the hunter is easy to level, has a pet, and again, like the other classes, is very mobile. The rogue is also a good option. However, I would stick to the rogue only if you're on a PvP server, just because of how good the rogue is at PvP. You can be very competitive in picking your herbs because of how quick a rogue can move around, and at the same time, you can gank other players who are trying to steal your herbs. So when it comes to farming, we have to ask, what kind of stuff are you farming? Are you going to be farming dungeons for twink blues and greens to disenchant? Or are you looking for crafting materials? Are you looking for pets, recipes? The list goes on and on for the different types of things that you can farm. The problem that I personally have with farming like this is that it's mostly RNG dependent. However, it does have the biggest potential. You could go from making 3 gold an hour to all of a sudden you find a couple of nice blues or even an epic, and all of a sudden you just made 4, 5, 6, even 1,000 gold. So it has a very high end. That being said, it's probably also one of the easiest things to do as well, especially if you're farming for lower end greens and blues, because you can just take a level 60, go to that dungeon, and farm it all day long, and you don't have to worry about competition of other players. So what would some of the best classes be for this type of farming? Only 2 really come to mind for this. The Frost Mage. You can teleport around the world, get wherever you need to go. You have a very strong AoE, which is great for the lower level dungeons when you're farming for those greens. As well, again, you have strong survivability because you're a mage, you can move around, you don't need to get hit. The other class that comes to mind is the Hunter. The Hunter has the strongest solo ability because of their pet. They can take on bosses that most other classes can't because they have a pet that can tank, and if worse comes to worse, they can always kite the boss around the entire dungeon and not take a lick of damage. The third and possibly the most complex way that you can make gold in Classic was crafting. Crafting was extremely important for resistance gear back in Classic. Because of that, if you knew when to hit the markets at the right time, you can make a boatload of cash really quick. So let's break down the different crafting professions. First off is tailoring. You're going to be targeting priests, warlocks, mages, and cloaks. This has a high potential just because of the amount of armor for different classes that you can make. Not only do you have 3 straight up classes, but you also have cloaks, which can be equipped by any class in the game. Specifically with cloaks, some of the best resistant cloaks come from tailoring, so it was very easy to make a lot of money very quickly. Next off is the leather workers. The leather workers are going to be focusing on leather and mail. They're going to be focusing on the rogue and druid and hunter and shaman, all for early games while they're creating just leather items. Then once we get into mail, they're going to be worried about paladins and warriors for earlier levels, and then hunters and shamans towards the end game. Because of the unique style of leatherworking, being able to craft both leather and mail at end game, it has another very high potential for money for crafting. The next crafters are the blacksmiths. The blacksmiths are primarily just going to be making stuff for paladins and warriors. There is some mail armor that they're going to make for hunters and shamans, but primarily they're going to be making armor for paladins and warriors. Aside from that, they also make weapons, and weapons are used by everybody. One side note for this is that for the legendary weapons, you're going to need blacksmithing. So if you plan on getting one of those, make sure you have blacksmithing and make sure you have it capped before you go into those raids. The last crafting profession, and possibly the one with the highest potential, is herbalism. Herbalism is going to make a lot of money early on and all the way down, all the way till you get to cap. People are always going to be buying potions for while they're leveling, whether it's their first character or their 6th character. Everybody needs potions. It's a huge part of what you need to do while you're leveling up. When you get to cap, you're also going to see a lot of purchases from your pots and your flasks on the auction house. People will always need flasks and pots no matter what they're doing, whether they're leveling, farming, raid progression, or even raid farming. People will also go through multiple stacks every time they do those things. In Classic, the potions were stackable and can be used within the same fight. If you wipe on Onyxia 10 times, you could end up going through 50 potions between buff potions and health potions. Next up is a profession that everybody can have even after their 2 primary professions. Cooking. Cooking is good because everybody uses it in raids. Without cooking, you don't get your food buffs. Even though everybody in raids uses this, because everybody can level it, it's usually not a high money generator. The next crafting profession is engineering. Engineering comes low on the list of money making just because of how self-reliant it is. You put a lot of money that you put into engineering into yourself. You don't really put it back out there for other people to consume. If you're looking for your min-max on DPS and survivability, then you're going to want engineering. If you want to make gold, you're not going to want to pick up engineering. Enchanting is another strong candidate for moneymaker. However, it is also more than likely the hardest one to get to the point where you can make a lot of money with it. Enchanting is very expensive to level. That being said, you can enchant armors and weapons. People are always spamming trade chat to look for those enchants. People are always upgrading gear and always looking for the best enchants for their weapons and armor. Something else that's in enchanting's favor is that it doesn't require a gathering profession to be able to level. So you have a free, quote-unquote, second slot for another profession. The only downside to enchanting is that there were no scrolls back in Classic. So if you wanted to level up your enchanting, you would either have to overwrite your own enchants or sit there and spam trade chat and say, free enchants in front of the auction house, come and get it. Something else that's worth mentioning for crafting professions is that there were quest lines for the much harder recipes, and a lot of trainers were in remote out-of-place areas that you needed to go in order to level up your crafting profession past a certain point. For example, if you wanted to get enchanting past a certain level, you actually had to travel to Uldaman to train further in your enchanting ways. If you had the patience to collect rare recipes and you had a lot of money to spend on them, then you could make a lot of money on the auction house or by spamming trade saying you have this enchant. But it takes a lot of investment to get to that point. So what are some of the best classes for doing this? Well, really it doesn't matter what class you're choosing as long as you're not making a dumb decision. What I mean by that is, don't pick a warrior and go tailoring. It's pretty self-explanatory how you should pick your professions with your class if you're going with a crafting profession. If you want to be a leather worker, make sure you're going to play a rogue, a druid, a hunter, or a shaman. If you're going to be a blacksmith, you probably want to go with a warrior or a paladin. However, you do have herbalism and enchanting. Those two go with whatever class you'd like. Most of the time, you'll see enchanters be people like mages or priests, where they can pick up tailoring and enchanting, since tailoring doesn't require a gathering profession either. Engineering is another one that can go pretty much to anybody. It doesn't really have an armor requirement. So just like enchanting and herbalism, if you like it, take it. So in the end, most people tend to gravitate toward one gathering profession and one crafting profession. That's pretty much what I did every time I made a new character in my youth. It was an effective way to level up your professions as you play through the game. It doesn't bring in the highest amount of gold, but you're going to be able to help self-sustain your character with item upgrades or potions as you level up through the world. When I get into Classic, when it comes back out through Blizzard servers, I'm thinking of taking 2 gathering professions and just go straight all the way to caps, so that way I can make as much money as possible to try and get my mounts. I'm also going to push 1 level 60 all the way up and use that as my farmer to help me level up other characters as well, so I don't have to worry about how much gold I'm making as I'm leveling. For this, I'm probably going to pick herbalism and skinning. I'm hoping that I can find some guildies or some friends that will be willing to make me some armor for whatever I can give them, or make me some potions for whatever I can give them. Once I get to 60 and I'm comfortable with the amount of gold I'm making, I will more than likely drop skinning and pick up herbalism, just because of how high the potential is for the gold in that aspect. Well, anyways, everybody, I hope this has helped you and informed you, and you might be able to make a little bit of a better decision on what crafting professions to grab, or what gathering professions to grab, or how you're just going to make your gold at end game in Classic anyways. Make sure you remember to keep on making that gold as you're powering up through the levels. It's going to be very important once you hit 40 to make sure you have enough gold to buy that mount. Take care, everybody, and I'll see you in the next one.
Hey, it's Radit here. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe as well. It really helps out the channel. We put out multiple new videos each week, and we appreciate all of your support. Thanks for watching, everyone, and cheers.